You have just stepped into the Midlife Revolution, your space to ignite possibility, redefine purpose, and embrace the power that comes with age. Co-hosted by yours truly, Coach Wayne.
And I'm Coach Stacy M. Lewis. And we're two seasoned coaches focused on the midlife community of color. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. In a world that sometimes forgets the power and the wisdom that comes with age, we're here to ignite a revolution and rewrite the narrative of this incredible journey.
So, whether you're navigating career shifts, rediscovering passions, or challenging the status quo, this is your space. So buckle up. Let's dive into the Midlife Revolution. Hey, good morning. Happy Tuesday. It's August the 6th. Stacy, I got it right?
You got it right, Wayne. You got it right today.
That is so cool. And listen, I wanted to just let folks know that we have in the last couple of weeks been doing the lives, but recording them and sending them to you because Miss Stacy she has been on the road taking care of business, and we just
got a job to do. Sister got a job to do.
Absolutely, I love it. I love that zoom in, Stacy. You got a job to do. And how's it going, Stacy?
It is going really well. Life is good. Here we are, healthy and excited to really talk about today's topic, which is really about how we define, redefine, imagine, reimagine our identity in this midlife phase. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I think there are so many aspects. I think it could be another one of those like part one, part two. I don't know. But there are so many aspects of our identity that we should be talking about as a community. And we want to thank all of you for being part of the Midlife Revolution community. Welcome to today's episode where we are talking about reimagining midlife identity. And I have so many places where I can really think about starting. And Wayne will do a great job of highlighting some of the various types of identities we're talking about. But to really bring it home, I want to just point out, some of us might be in a position where we are restarting our careers, right? And having to think about our identity, how we define ourselves. Some of us might be in situations where we had an empty nest and now we no longer do because one of the little birdies has flown back home as an adult birdie. And how do we then renegotiate that relationship? And how does that impact our identity? And another example of really how this, how we can bring this really home is talking about the fact that some of us are taking care of aging parents. And there's so much complexity there in how that experience impacts how we imagine and or define our current identity. So I just say that as an opener, but let's just start to jump in, Wayne, and really, really bring this home for our listening and viewing audience.
All right, so let me do some Jamaican style for you, Stacy. Rewind. Okay. We're going to rewind because we didn't talk about our identity. Who are we for our listeners, Stacy? You go first, Stacy. Who are you? What do you do?
Rewind. I love it. There's definitely some West Indian tunes I could come out with, but I'll stay focused. Hello again, everybody. I'm Stacy M. Lewis. I am a nonprofit executive, a health educator, and a midlife women's coach. And I'm so excited to be here with Wayne, as you can tell, because we're already 4.5 minutes in and we didn't introduce ourselves. So my joy is really helping women push through this midlife season in a way that they feel as though they are thriving and really seizing every opportunity to live a life they love. So, Wayne, what up with you, man?
Well, man, I am Wayne Coach VIP. I help brothers in midlife restore their values, redefine their identity, and sort of reimagine their purpose. And so I help them kind of get through any sort of mires that they may have, misgivings or fears, uncertainties in midlife, so they can truly enjoy the joys of it and come out better on the second half. That's what I do, Stacy, as a
Yeah.
coach.
Yeah, I love it. And I think we can both uh, say to our listening audience that we're really talking to those that self-identify with the term midlife. This is not necessarily age specific. Sometimes it is kind of where you are, whether it be in your career or your parenting or just your life. And really in this season where it's a critical time because we're now more aware that we have this one precious gift of life and we really want to live it to the full, leave here empty. So let's talk about how we reimagine our midlife identity, Wayne.
Yeah. So identity, psychologists typically throw around a lot of terminology, but one of the easier ones that I like and I see is identity under the cusp of self-esteem,
Mm.
self concept, self-image, and just individuation. When folks have a sense of self-esteem, which is how you feel about yourself, right? And of course, we talk about mental health, that's part of it too. Self-concept, the model of how you own that you, the I am, and self-image, how you view yourself, see yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I throw in another one when I work with my clients, and when we're projecting, Stacy, to help folks to identify where they want to be, I help them create a self-ideal for the future as part of
I love
identity. So these are those things that typically are thrown around as formation to a solid identity.
Yes, and uh the multi factors of life really can impact our self concept. I also use that term, can really impact our self concept in many, many ways. And so, as we start to talk about what that self concept is, it gets even more detailed because let's start with the professional identity or the professional self concept, how you see yourself, define yourself as a professional, and how that and how you live that out.
Yeah. So I was looking for the tag to put it up there, self, professional self. And how do we see ourselves? Now, Stacey, I'll tell you, I've been in positions before where when I left that position, which I had a title to and a sense of belonging to, I think I may mention this before, I was lost. So I
Mm,
referred myself as we oftentimes do when we go to gatherings and people say, "Hi, who are you? And what do you do?" We tie in what we do to ourself. Our professional identity becomes how we identify. And I would say that as we age, we need to be able to have a clear line of demarcation. What we do is not necessarily who we are. So to own that as a tag to say that, you know, my title that I'm wearing defines who
mhm.
I am is not always the entire truth. There may be some truth in it in terms of aligning with purpose, but Stacey, I would challenge people to say that, especially as you grow older, you need to see yourself in a larger light than simply by way of your vocation or profession.
Absolutely. And for many professionals, they might identify as a strong leader or a compassionate manager. And yet, even that is likely an identity that goes beyond your profession, right? If you are a strong leader, you're so on the job and likely off the job. If you're a compassionate manager, you're likely a compassionate manager on the job and in your home. And so this really making sure we're clear on our identity um and have it in its proper perspective. And you're absolutely right. What you do is not who you are.
Yeah. And how does that get in the way when we are locked into that professional self? And like right now, I'm seeing it where there is a lot of uh, dynamic changes with corporations as they start looking at the quarter, or in general just looking at their projection moving forward, and they're seeing that they may need to make changes. People are being called on to be more versatile and agile. And if you hold on so much so to that locked in version of the old self, you may wind up out of a job. And so part of your professional self must be being able to pivot and to move forward and let go, if you have to, the baggage of an old identity self, even on the professional level. So I would encourage midlifers to think about that if they want to survive in today's market.
I agree, and we'll talk about strategies a little later in the show. But what you just said, I think is truly important to really all of these aspects of identity that we'll talk about today, and that really is paying attention, right? Being intentional about how you show up professionally and how that is both perceived and received, and where are the opportunities to really uh, not only look at it but maybe do some modifications. So love
Yeah.
what you said.
Stacey, I don't know if we want to put together or separate cultural and social identities.
Hmm. You know what was interesting is that I remembered that conversation, and I wondered how our spiritual identity fits into there, but we'll leave it. Well, let's go social, cultural, and we'll jump into spiritual later.
Yeah. Now, social media, that's
Mm,
all about identity. And unfortunately, oftentimes we go down a windy road to nowhere if we get hooked into that sort of uh, identity creation, because it's sense to it oftentimes creates a false sense. There are people judging you, there are people that you're making impressions on, people who don't even care about you tomorrow morning, all for a quick like. And so when you get older as and more mature, it's important that you shake off all that stuff and stick to your authentic self. And so the idea of social identity is important if it aligns with your values, your core values,
yes.
and the who you want other people to really say you are must have some alignment with, when the lights are out and you're by yourself, who you truly are.
I I couldn't agree more, and I can see why we coupled the social piece with the cultural piece, because so much of who we are, our identity, is as people of color in particular, inextricably linked to our cultural identity, and how we show up, whether it be in social media, on the job, how we feel about ourselves is often based upon uh, our culture. Our whether it be our culture when we were younger, our current culture now. Um, our, the family friend circle, our culture, what we know people, our ancestors have been through, our culture often impacts our current identity. And when it's impacting your identity in ways in which you feel proud, or in which you feel is something that serves as a solid foundation, that's fantastic. Yet, when it impacts your identity in ways that are not serving you well, again, another opportunity to just be a bit introspective and see how this aspect of identity is impacting how you move forward.
Yeah. And Stacy, I have a thing about, so here's a thin line: acculturation and assimilation. Acculturation, when somebody comes into a new environment and they kind of drop theirs and just takes on the new culture, versus assimilating, meaning owning their own self, staying true
Mm-hmm.
to themselves, but yet figuring out how to understand the codes and how to get through by assimilating. I am from Jamaica, but I came to the US. I didn't forget that I'm Jamaican. But at the same time, I recognize that there are things they do a certain way here. And so proper assimilation makes sense, so that I'm not an outcast and I don't stand out as this guy just doesn't know that he's no longer in the island, man. So the truth is, I think too, as we talk about middle age or midlife, if you see it through a spectrum of the journey rather than just a age,
Mm-hmm.
Stacey, I think it's important that we learn to assimilate and recognize that there's some things that we shake off, but we can gracefully assimilate into the new way of being and thinking in midlife.
Yeah, I was thinking about this cultural identity piece. It really is quite interesting, because one thing we can add to this sauce um, is how cultural identity can come with cultural pressures. With, sometime we're, I don't know about you, Wayne, but I've been told in certain circles that that there's still some issues with the way I speak. That's what I'll say. And there, the alignment or the misalignment with my culture in my speaking. And oftentimes that cultural pressure is not from within my culture, but there are cultural pressures that we can experience from within our culture, however our culture is defined, whether we're talking about our household culture, our race ethnicity culture, our socioeconomic culture. And we want to be mindful or aware of the pressures that might be coming from our culture,
Yeah,
and how we are kind of letting that impact our cultural identity.
yeah, yeah. I just like the idea that at a certain place in our life, and I like to think that midlife is probably a good checkpoint. We got to start being real to ourselves. And if we had in our minds to forge a fake identity to get ahead to this point, it's
Mm-hmm.
probably time. You know what I mean? Because I think part of it is to be real
Mm-hmm.
and to fulfill our sense of self. Not okay. Let me talk about this, for example, in terms of identity. A lot of folk up to this point, late 30s, 40s, even 50s, have been living in the dark, not being true to themselves, and they're very unhappy with who they are. And they're
Mm-hmm.
doing this to satisfy a spouse, a family member, relatives, friends, neighbors, and it's just time, I think, for us to be free, Stacy, to kind of step out and own your identity, your true self.
Yeah. Yeah, and as we own our identity, to release or relinquish the pieces that are not serving us.
Yes.
That the whether it be the negative decisions, whether it be the negative people, anything that is hindering us from living, like you're saying, our authentic identity, our authentic selves.
Yeah.
And really, um, in one of our episodes, we had the hierarchy of needs, that
Yeah.
triangle, the I think it says not Maslow.
Maslow's.
Yeah. So the hierarchy of needs, and at the pinnacle is that self actualization, really
Yeah.
living
Yes.
in your highest self,
Yes.
your, some of us say your best self, but it really is where you are living at as you were created to, really pouring out your gifts and really being um kind of living in a way that is actualizing all that you were put here on this earth to do.
Yes. Yes.
And how you talked earlier about how you see yourself, your self concept, um that authenticity, those holding on to things that may not be serving you or your identity, is critical to really releasing, relinquishing, to embrace or step into actualizing your highest self.
Love it. Powerful points. And typically what's going to happen is if we spend our lives living in this cloak instead of
Mm,
self-actualizing, realizing and aligning with who you were born to be, your spiritual self, and giving into that, you really never find that true sense of peace, satisfaction, fulfillment, and significance.
mhm.
And money won't do it. And so, old people, pardon the pun or the use.
Who you calling old, huh?
All right. People like me, Stacy, what happens oftentimes, you start getting more real when it comes to, you don't ask a very ancient person, an older person, what they think about what you're wearing. They'll tell
Yes,
you. Don't ask them.
yes.
There's no pretense.
If you don't want to know, don't
Yeah.
ask.
And
Hmm.
that's a sense of freedom. And
Hmm.
when we talk about identity, personal self, personal identity, um, it sort of comprises everything we talked about. But how do you show up? What's your I am? After
Mm,
you say I am, what comes after that? That's important, you know. And so I know the old school Jamaican men have a way of saying they're stuck in their place because, boy, me do this and so me do it. But that I am is something you can shed. You can let it go. When you know better, do better, right?
yes, yes. Yes, you don't want to hold on to an I am that is holding you from really living into your highest self, your highest purpose, your highest authenticity, your highest gifts, as we were just talking about. You're absolutely right. You really want to make sure that you're starting to look at that I am, and consider even writing it out. I am. how
Yeah.
how am I thinking about myself? What is that self concept? How am I talking about myself? How am I visioning myself? Um, and really start to look at that in a way, not that it's constructive or destructive, but in a way that really starts to help you identify where some of the opportunities to redefine, right? To re-identify oneself, is really what we want to share today.
And there's power, so much power in redefining yourself because this is what it does. It frees you up, meaning a lot of times we're locked into this limiting belief about who we are, about our sense of worth, our sense of ability, our sense of what's possible for us. And this is locked into our identity. We talked about that before, right? The Paul syndrome. and
Yes.
and so people are locked into this sense, which oftentimes is decided upon when they were 7 years old. Somebody told them you're not good enough, and they own that. I had a friend today. We were on the phone prior to this call, and he says to me, you know, I have ADHD, and I said to him, I'm glad you said it that way, because some people would say I am ADHD. When you own that thing, the thing kind of drives in front of you. It shows up. If you are I am ADHD, then everything after that kind of makes an excuse to being ADHD. It's a diagnosis. It's not
You're
permanent. It's
absolutely
temporal.
right. Right, right,
Yeah.
right. You're absolutely right. You are identifying yourself as something,
Yeah.
as ADHD, not something that you might be facing or managing, but you're saying, I am this.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why many of us, even as coaches, when someone says, I am sick, it is like, no, you are not feeling well today. You
Ah,
are, what you are managing or pressing through
yes.
feeling less than 100%. But
Yes.
you are not sick. You are not, I am cancer. You are not any of that. And I
Yes.
think it does start with how we think, right?
Yes.
Which then impacts how we speak, which then impacts what we
Yeah.
hear.
Yes. Yes. It's so powerful, Stacy. And I when I do the work, and I'm sure this is similar to you, the transformative work is to help people to see themselves differently. You can't be the same P at the start and wind up expecting to be corn at the end, right? You have to start thinking how corns think, right? That's corny, right? Well, anyway.
That was a little corny, but go ahead.
But this is what we teach people to do. When you call Stacy and I, and we're going to go through you having a identity crisis, as it were. You're stuck and you want something else. You want to be a better wife, a better husband, a better father, a better mother, a better employee, a better employer, a better whatever it is. You have to start seeing yourself. Your I am, your identity has to change and project to be that thing you want to be before you get there, to change your
Yes,
thoughts, your habits, everything.
yes, because one of your most important relationships, which is why we're noting relational identity, is your relationship with yourself. How you're seeing, how you're speaking, how you're thinking about yourself, how
Yes.
you're treating yourself, how you're naming yourself.
Yes.
And that relationship with yourself
Yeah.
is indeed the relational identity that you then bring into other relationships, right?
Yeah.
So it's your relationship, the identity that you have with the relationship with yourself. And
Yeah.
then as you bring that into relationships with others, that is the identity, your relational identity that you're trying to relate
Yes.
with others.
And you can craft your relational identity. And of course, all of these evolve to the personal identity. You talked about spiritual one too. The relationship that you have with your spiritual guide, Father, God, it helps to define who you are, how you show up. A married person at a engagement before marriage takes on a different personality persona, and after marriage, if they become a survivor to a spouse that has moved on,
Mm-hmm.
again it changes. So the relationship that you're a part of helps to, and again we talk about fluidity in your identity and assimilation. Doesn't mean your truest self, your base self, is distorted and gone, but
Mm-hmm.
you have
Mm-hmm.
to know how, especially as you get older, how to flex and be agile and to make it, like you said, Stacy, to make it serve you. If it's not serving you, you know, it's no good. Ditch it. Right. Stacy,
Bye.
we're almost out of time.
Well, I would just touch on, this piece about spiritual identity because I think that it is so important for those that have a belief, right? You talked about I am. Um, that using the core of who you are. There's that spiritual piece of, we are spiritual beings in a fleshly body, having this earthly experience. And it is so critical to our success to connect with, to know our spiritual identity, and to be able to use that in ways that fuel us positively in the relational area, in the personal area, in the professional area, to really use it as a foundation to move us forward.
I hear you, Stacy. On that note, Stacy, I want to invite folks who are listening in and who will be joining us on the various handles that we broadcast this midlife revolution. If you are dealing with an identity issue, if you're being challenged in terms of how you define yourself, if you're feeling some kind of way about who you are, give us a call and we will try to help you by showing you how coaching and our intervention can take you to another side. And Stacy, any last word? That's it for today, Stacy. Till next Tuesday.
I would echo what you just said and just remind people that you're not stuck unless you stop. So keep on going and reach out when you need support.
Bye for now,
See you
folks.
next time, Wayne.
Bye,
Thank you guys
sis.
for joining us.
And there you have it, folks. This week's episode of the Midlife Revolution. Hey, we truly appreciate you spending this time in this space with us. Join us next week at the same time as we dive into relevant topics and present solutions to spark new thinking and empower your midlife journey.
Don't forget, if today's episode resonated with you, share your thoughts and suggest topics in the comments. And of course, remember to subscribe, share, like, and hit that notification bell. You are the Midlife Revolution. I'm Coach Stacy, and I'm cheering you on.
And I'm Coach Wayne, and I'll see you at the top.